The day began like any other for Mira. She woke before sunrise, the weak glow of morning light spreading through the thin curtains of her small apartment. The kitchen smelled faintly of instant coffee and toast. Her 7-year-old son Ryan still slept on the couch, curled under a blanket too small for his growing frame. Life had been hard for them, but Mira had learned to live with what she had. She worked long hours at a local grocery store. It was not a dream job, but it paid for rent and food. Every morning she promised herself that one day she would find something better for Ryan. That day, however, started differently. When she opened the door to collect the mail, she found a thick envelope sitting on the doormat. It was old and yellowed, with her name written neatly in dark ink. Mira turned the envelope over and saw no return address, only a faded stamp from a small town she had never visited. For a moment, she thought it might be a mistake. No one ever sent her letters. She opened it slowly, her hands trembling. Inside was a formal letter from a law office in a place called Brindle Hollow. The letter explained that an elderly woman named Clara had passed away and left Mira a property in her will. Mira frowned. She had never heard of any Clara. She wondered if this was some scam or mistake. Still, curiosity began to rise in her chest. She read again, and at the bottom, there was a signature from the lawyer, along with an address and a request for her to visit as soon as possible. The letter mentioned a cabin located deep in the woods near Brindle Hollow. That night she could not sleep. She kept looking at the letter on the small table beside her bed. Her mind kept asking questions. Who was Clara? Why would a stranger leave her a cabin? Ryan noticed her worried face during breakfast the next morning and asked if something was wrong. Mira smiled faintly and told him about the letter. Ryan's eyes lit up when he heard the word cabin. A house in the woods? Can we go see it? He asked with excitement. Mira hesitated. She had no car, only a few $100s in savings, and the town mentioned in the letter was several hours away. But a quiet voice inside her said this might be a sign, a chance to start again. 2 days later, Mira packed what little they had into 2 bags and rented an old car. The journey to Brindle Hollow was long and silent. The road twisted between tall pine trees and empty hills. As they drove, the town grew smaller behind them, replaced by endless forest. Ryan pressed his face against the window, watching the trees blur past. By evening, they reached the address written in the letter. The lawyer's office was small and tidy, located on the corner of an empty street. The man inside was middle-aged, with kind eyes and an old-fashioned suit. He greeted Mira by name as if he had been expecting her for years. He explained that Clara had once lived alone in the woods and that she had no close family. Her will stated that her property should go to Mira Turner, daughter of Elaine Turner. When Mira heard her mother's name, her heart skipped a beat. Elaine Turner had died when Mira was a child. They had lived in different towns their whole life, and Mira never knew much about her mother's past. She felt a chill run through her when the lawyer handed her a small brass key and a folded map. The lawyer explained that the cabin was about 5 miles out of town, near a lake called Silvermere. It had been empty for years, but it was still hers now, completely paid for. Mira thanked him and drove out with Ryan before the sun set. The road became narrow, the path uneven and surrounded by thick woods. For a moment she wondered if she had made a mistake. Finally, the trees parted and the cabin appeared. It stood on a small clearing beside the lake, the roof dark with moss, the windows dusty. It looked old but strong. Ryan ran toward it, shouting with joy, his voice echoing across the still water. Mira stood beside the car and took a deep breath. The air smelled of pine and cold earth. She walked up the wooden steps and unlocked the front door with the brass key. The door creaked open, revealing a large room filled with dust, sunlight, and silence. Old furniture stood under white sheets. Cobwebs hung in the corners. There was a fireplace, a small kitchen, and 2 bedrooms. Despite the dirt and age, something about the place felt peaceful. Ryan explored every corner, touching the walls and laughing at the strange paintings that hung crookedly on the walls. "Is this our home now?" he asked, turning toward his mother with a hopeful smile. Mira paused, looking around the cabin again. She could almost imagine it clean and warm, with curtains on the windows and a fire burning in the hearth. She smiled softly. "Maybe it is, Ryan. Maybe this is our home now." They spent that night inside using candles because there was no power yet. The wind outside whispered through the trees and the lake shimmered under the moonlight. Ryan fell asleep quickly, his face calm and happy. Mira stayed awake a little longer, staring at the flickering candle flame. Something about the cabin felt strange, as if it held memories she could not yet understand. Before she went to bed, she looked around one more time. Her eyes fell on a painting above the fireplace. It showed a woman standing near the same lake outside. The woman had kind eyes and soft gray hair, and though Mira could not explain it, she looked familiar. There was a small name written at the bottom corner, Clara. The next morning, Mira began cleaning the place. She opened the windows, swept the floor, and washed the dishes she found in the cupboards. The cabin slowly came back to life. Birds sang outside and sunlight poured through the windows. It felt almost like the cabin was welcoming them. Ryan found an old wooden box under one of the beds. It was locked and the keyhole was shaped like a flower. He showed it to his mother, his eyes full of curiosity. Mira took the box, feeling its weight. She tried to open it but could not. The wood smelled old and the corners were carved with strange symbols. She placed it on the table, planning to look at it later. But something about the box made her uneasy. It looked too important to be forgotten under a bed. That evening, as the sun went down and the sky turned orange, Mira stood outside the cabin, staring at the lake. She felt a strange pull, a whisper from the water and trees. She wondered who Clara really was and why her mother's name was in the will. She also wondered what secrets this cabin might be hiding. Inside, the wooden box sat quietly on the table, waiting. The morning sunlight streamed through the old cabin's windows, warming the wooden floor. Mira stretched and listened to the quiet sound of birds outside. For the first time in a long while, she felt calm. Ryan was already awake, sitting near the table where the wooden box still rested. He stared at it with the same curiosity as the night before. "Can we open it today, Mama?" he asked eagerly. Mira smiled and nodded. "We can try again." She took the box in her hands and examined it closely. The keyhole was small and shaped like a flower. She tried a few old keys she had found in a drawer, but none fit. The box remained tightly closed, as if guarding its secret. After breakfast, she decided to explore the cabin more carefully. She hoped she might find a key or at least learn more about the woman who once lived there. The air inside still smelled faintly of pine and old paper. The walls were lined with faded pictures and shelves full of dusty books. Some of the books were about plants, medicine, and old history. Others were journals, each marked with years long past. Mira picked up one of the journals and opened it. The first page had a name written in neat handwriting. Clara Turner. The name gave her a shiver. It was the same name on the painting. As she flipped through the pages, she saw neat paragraphs written in calm, steady handwriting. The words spoke about life near the lake, about loneliness, and about a woman's memories of family long gone. Mira sat down on the floor, reading quietly while Ryan played outside. In one entry, Clara mentioned a woman named Elaine, who had left the cabin years ago to start a new life in the city. Mira's heart began to pound. Elaine Turner was her mother's name. She read further and discovered that Clara had raised Elaine when her parents died young. That meant Clara was not a stranger at all. She was Mira's grandmother. Tears filled Mira's eyes. She had never known she still had family. Her mother had never spoken about Clara or this cabin. For years, Mira had believed they were alone in the world, but now she understood that someone had been waiting for her without her knowing. Later that day, Mira took Rian down to the lake. The water was calm, and the reflection of the trees rippled gently with the wind. They skipped stones and laughed together. Mira told her son that the cabin had once belonged to his great-grandmother. Ryan's eyes grew wide with wonder. He said it felt like they had found a piece of their family they never knew existed. When they returned to the cabin, Mira went back to cleaning the smaller rooms. She found a locked drawer in an old writing desk near the window. The handle was rusty, and the wood creaked when she pulled on it. Using a small screwdriver, she managed to open it. Inside, there were old letters, photographs, and a small golden locket. She opened the locket carefully. Inside was a tiny picture of her mother as a young woman, and another of a man she did not recognize. Behind the locket lay a folded piece of paper. It looked like a map. She spread it on the table. The drawing was rough, but she could see the outline of the lake, the cabin, and a spot marked with a small red cross near the woods. Her heart beat faster as she traced the mark with her finger. What could be there? Was it something Clara had left behind? She showed it to Ryan, who immediately grew excited and begged to go look. Mira hesitated. unsure if it was safe to wander through the forest. But curiosity was stronger than fear. They packed a small bag with water and snacks and set out toward the marked spot. The forest was thick and quiet, filled with the soft rustle of leaves. Birds fluttered from branch to branch, and the sound of their footsteps mixed with the crunch of dried leaves underfoot. Ryan led the way, holding the map like an explorer on a grand mission. After nearly an hour of walking, they reached a clearing. The ground was uneven, and in the center stood a large oak tree with roots spreading like veins across the soil. The red cross on the map matched the place exactly. Mira looked around and noticed a patch of disturbed earth near the roots. Someone had once dug there. Ryan pointed and said, "Mama, maybe something is buried there." Mira knelt and began to dig with her hands. The soil was soft and damp. After a few minutes, her fingers touched something hard. She brushed away the dirt and found a small metal box rusted with age. The lock on it was broken, so she lifted the lid slowly. Inside were several envelopes, each filled with old documents, bank papers, and a leather pouch tied with string. When she opened the pouch, small gold coins spilled into her hand. Her breath caught in her throat. She looked at Ryan, who was staring at the coins with wide eyes. There were also a few stones that looked like diamonds, glowing faintly in the sunlight. Mira sat still for a moment, her heart racing. She could not believe what she was seeing. She took a deep breath, trying to understand. Clara must have hidden this long ago, maybe to protect it. The papers looked official, with dates and numbers that meant little to her. She packed everything carefully into the bag, deciding to study it later. As they walked back, the forest felt different. The wind seemed to whisper secrets. Ryan talked excitedly about treasure and how they were now rich, but Mira stayed quiet. She felt the weight of the discovery pressing on her shoulders. If this truly belonged to Clara, then it was part of their family history. But why had her grandmother hidden it? And why leave it for her to find now? When they returned to the cabin, the sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and pink. Mira spread the papers on the table under the lamp. She wiped the dust off one and read the words carefully. It was a bank certificate from many years ago, showing ownership of several accounts worth millions in today's value. Her hands trembled as she realized what she was holding. She counted the documents, coins, and stones. It was clear that Clara had left behind a secret fortune, carefully hidden away from the world. But there was something else inside the box, a letter with her name written on it. The handwriting was shaky but familiar from the journal pages. Mira opened it slowly and began to read. Clara wrote that she had saved her entire life after losing her husband. She had invested wisely but feared greedy relatives and strangers would come for her wealth, so she buried it instead. She explained that she left the cabin and everything within to Mira because she was the only one with a kind heart, just like her mother Elaine. Mira felt tears roll down her cheeks as she read. It was more than money. It was love. A message from a woman she had never met but who had cared for her all along. Clara's words spoke about family, hope, and trust. At the end of the letter, Clara asked her to use the gift not for herself alone, but to build a future for her child and help others. Ryan came closer and hugged his mother. "Does this mean we can stay here forever?" he asked softly. Mira looked at him, smiling through her tears. "Yes, Ryan. This is our home now." That night, the wind outside grew gentle and the cabin felt alive. The shadows on the walls danced like silent guardians. Mira placed the letter back into the box and set it near the fireplace. She knew life was about to change, but she also knew this was not the end of Clara's story. Something deep inside told her there was still more to uncover about her grandmother's past. The next morning came bright and calm. The sunlight touched the lake like gold, and soft mist floated above the water. Mira stood at the window holding a cup of tea. She still could not believe what they had found the day before. The letter from Clara had changed everything. The hidden box, the gold coins, the bank papers, all of it felt like a dream. Ryan sat on the floor, building small towers from the coins. He was laughing, happy in a way Mira had not seen for years. She smiled at his joy, but deep inside her heart she felt a quiet worry. The letter had mentioned that Clara feared greedy people. If others found out about the treasure, would they be safe? After breakfast, Mira decided to go through the rest of the cabin. Something about Clara's words made her believe there was still more to discover. She wanted to understand her grandmother's story fully. Ryan followed her as they opened every drawer and checked every corner. In the back room, Mira found an old wardrobe covered in dust. Inside were a few dresses, some boots, and a box filled with photographs. She took them out carefully. The pictures showed Clara as a young woman, smiling beside a man near the same lake. Another photo showed a little girl who looked just like Mira when she was a child. The back of the photo said, Elaine, age 5. Mira touched the photo gently. It was strange to see her mother as a child, happy and free. Her mother had never spoken about her childhood or her mother's cabin. It made Mira wonder what had happened between them. While Mira looked through the photos, Ryan ran upstairs. A few minutes later, he shouted for her to come. She hurried up the stairs and found him pointing at a loose wooden panel near the ceiling. "Mama, I think something is behind here," he said excitedly. Mira climbed on a chair and pressed the panel. It moved slightly. She took a small knife and carefully pried it open. Behind it was a narrow space filled with dust and an old envelope. She reached in and pulled it out. Inside were several folded papers and a small silver key. The papers were letters written by Clara to Elaine. Mira sat on the bed and began to read. The letters told the story of a family divided. Clara wrote about how Elaine had left the cabin because she wanted to build a life in the city. They had argued because Elaine had wanted to sell the cabin, but Clara refused. She had written that the cabin was built by her husband's hands and held the family's memories. After Elaine left, Clara never heard from her again. As Mira read, tears filled her eyes. She could feel the pain between mother and daughter, the silence that had grown into years of distance. She now understood why her mother never spoke of her past. Ryan looked at the silver key in her hand. "Maybe it opens the wooden box," he said. Mira's heart jumped. She ran downstairs, grabbed the box, and tried the key. It fit perfectly. When she turned it, the box opened with a soft click. Inside were several small items, an old photograph, a few notes, and a pendant shaped like a bird. The photograph showed Clara and a group of people standing in front of a stone building. On the back of the photo, a message was written, Silvermere Lodge, 1964. Mira had never heard of that name before. She searched through the notes and found one that mentioned the same place. The note said that Clara once worked at Silvermere Lodge as a caretaker for a wealthy family. There was also a line that caught Mira's attention. It said, "The truth lies behind the lodge wall where the river bends." She folded the note and placed it in her pocket. It sounded like another clue. Ryan was curious and asked what it meant. Mira told him that they might need to visit the lodge and see if it still existed. Later that day, Mira drove into Brindle Hollow to ask about the old Silvermere Lodge. She stopped at a small cafe and spoke to the woman behind the counter. The woman was kind and old with gentle eyes. When Mira mentioned the lodge, the woman looked surprised. She said the place had burned down many years ago, but part of it still stood near the northern edge of the lake. It was abandoned now, covered in ivy and forgotten by most. Mira thanked her and returned to the car. The sky had begun to cloud and the wind carried the smell of rain. Ryan sat beside her, clutching the map. They drove along the narrow forest road until they reached the northern side of the lake. There, hidden between tall trees, stood the remains of an old stone building. The walls were cracked and vines crawled over the windows. The roof had fallen in many places, but parts of the structure still stood strong. Mira parked the car and stepped out carefully. The ground was soft with mud and the air felt heavy. Ryan stayed close to her side. They entered through a broken doorway. Inside, the air smelled of damp stone and old wood. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the roof, casting light across the dusty floor. Mira walked slowly, her footsteps echoing softly. At the back of the room, she found a large stone wall with cracks running through it. She remembered Clara's note. The truth lies behind the lodge wall where the river bends. She stepped closer and noticed faint marks carved into one of the stones. They looked like the same flower symbol that was on the wooden box. She pushed against the stone and it moved slightly. Behind it, there was a hollow space. Mira reached inside and pulled out a small leather bag. She opened it and found several old documents yellowed with age. They were deeds and certificates showing ownership of land near the lake. One of the papers had Clara's signature. Another showed that the land was now worth several $1,000,000. Mira's eyes widened in shock. She realized that Clara's hidden fortune was not only in gold and jewels, but also in land that had gained great value over the years. She sat down on a broken chair, her hands shaking as she tried to take it all in. Ryan looked around, his eyes full of wonder. "Grandma Clara must have wanted you to find all this," he said softly. Mira nodded. She wanted us to know our history. She wanted us to have a better life. Thunder rolled in the distance and rain began to fall. They hurried back to the car, carrying the papers carefully. The drive back to the cabin was quiet. The forest glistened with rain and the air smelled fresh and new. When they reached the cabin, Mira placed the papers on the table beside the letter and the gold coins. She stared at them for a long time. Everything Clara had left was more than wealth. It was a story of love, loss, and forgiveness. That night, the rain continued to fall, and the sound of it filled the cabin. Mira sat by the fireplace thinking about all that had happened. She now understood that her grandmother had not only left her money but also a lesson. The cabin was not just a home. It was a bridge between past and present, between mistakes and healing. As the fire crackled, Mira looked at Ryan sleeping peacefully under a warm blanket. She whispered to herself that she would honor Clara's wish. She would use the gift to build something good, not only for herself and Ryan, but also for others who needed help. She did not know yet that the greatest secret was still waiting to be uncovered, hidden deep within the cabin walls where even Clara's letters had not reached. The morning air was crisp and fresh as Mira opened the cabin windows. Sunlight filled the rooms and Ryan ran outside laughing as he chased a bird across the small clearing. Mira felt lighter today. The discoveries of the past days, the hidden coins, the bank documents, and the land deeds had changed her life. Still, she felt that something was unfinished. Clara's letters and the old papers hinted that there was more to uncover. She decided to search the cabin one more time. Ryan followed her with a small backpack, eager for another adventure. Mira began with the attic, a place she had avoided because the ladder was narrow and the dust thick. She climbed slowly, holding onto the wooden rails. The attic was dark, filled with old trunks, stacks of newspapers, and faded blankets. Cobwebs hung like delicate curtains from the beams. Ryan ran to a small trunk in the corner. It was locked with a rusty latch. Mira examined it and noticed something unusual. The lock was shaped like the same flower symbol from the wooden box and the stone wall at Silvermere Lodge. She realized that Clara had marked her secrets with this symbol, almost like a guide. Mira found a small key hidden behind a loose plank in the floorboards. She inserted it into the trunk's lock and it clicked open. Inside were several old journals, each tied with a leather strap. She carefully untied them and began to read. The journals were filled with Clara's handwriting, recounting stories of her life, her love for the cabin, and her hopes for the future. One journal caught Mira's attention. It mentioned a hidden safe built into the wall of the living room, behind the fireplace. Clara wrote that it contained her most important secret, and that it should only be opened by someone who understood the family's history. Mira's heart raced. Could this be another hidden treasure or something even more important? Ryan's eyes were wide. Mama, is it another adventure? Mira smiled and nodded. She went to the fireplace and examined it carefully. The wood around the hearth was old but solid. She pressed her hands along the edges and found a small panel that moved slightly under pressure. Mira knelt and pulled it open. Behind it was a metal safe, small but sturdy. She opened the safe with the silver key from the wooden box. Inside were several envelopes, each labeled with dates spanning decades. Mira picked up the first envelope and found a note from Clara. It said that the contents were meant to help Mira understand the family's past and guide her in the future. Mira opened the envelopes one by one. The first contained letters from Clara to her mother, Elaine. They spoke of love, forgiveness, and hope. The second envelope contained old family documents and a list of properties, including the cabin, the lakeland, and some small buildings in town. The third envelope held more gold coins, gemstones, and a small leather pouch with a key. Mira's hands trembled. The key was tiny, almost delicate, but she felt its importance. She remembered the map from the wooden box and the note about Silvermere Lodge. Perhaps this key opened a final secret hidden somewhere near the lake. Ryan helped her pack the coins and documents safely. Mira made a plan. They would explore the lakeshore again, looking for clues from Clara's notes. She realized that her grandmother had carefully left a trail, a path meant to be followed only by someone patient and kind. The rain began in the afternoon, and Mira and Ryan waited under the cabin porch until it stopped. Then they walked along the edge of the lake, examining every tree, rock, and patch of grass. Mira studied the map and Clara's notes, matching the details carefully. Finally, they reached a cluster of rocks near the bend of the river that flowed into the lake. Mira noticed a small indentation in one of the stones. She knelt and pressed it, and the stone shifted slightly. Behind it was a narrow cavity containing a wooden box. The box was smaller than the first, but heavier. Mira carried it back to the cabin and placed it on the table. Inside, they found several stacks of old currency notes, more gold coins, and a collection of rare gemstones. Mira gasped. She realized that Clara had hidden nearly everything in stages. Each discovery had been part of a plan to ensure her family's future, without revealing the fortune to anyone else. Among the treasure, Mira found another envelope addressed to her by name. She opened it carefully. Inside, Clara had written her final words. "This cabin, the lake, and everything around it are your heritage. Protect it, use it wisely, and remember that family is more important than wealth. Help others as you can, and your life will be full of meaning. Trust your heart and follow the path you know is right." Mira felt a deep warmth in her heart. Clara's words were more valuable than any gold or gemstone. She understood now that the fortune was not meant for luxury, but for building a safe and happy life for Rian. It was a gift of security, and guidance. That evening, Mira and Ryan organized everything in the cabin. The treasures were placed safely in a locked chest, and the papers and letters were arranged in neat piles. Mira felt a sense of peace she had never known. The cabin was no longer just a place to live. It was a home filled with history, love, and hope. Rian sat near the fireplace, holding a small gemstone in his hand. "Mama, Grandma Clara must have loved us very much," he said softly. Mira smiled and hugged him tightly. "Yes, Rian, she did. And she left us a path to follow so we can be happy and safe." Later, Mira sat by the window watching the lake reflect the moonlight. The cabin felt alive with memories of Clara, Elaine, and the family they had lost and found again. She realized that her life had changed in more ways than one. The cabin was not only a home but a promise, a chance to build a future for herself and Ryan with hope, love, and kindness. As she prepared for bed, Mira glanced at the wooden box and the locked safe. She knew she had discovered almost everything, yet she felt that Clara's presence still lingered in the cabin. It was a gentle reminder that family, history, and love were treasures greater than anything gold could buy. Mira whispered softly, "Thank you, Grandma Clara. We will honor your gift and your love." Outside, the night was quiet. The lake shimmered under the moon, and the wind carried the soft rustle of leaves. The cabin, once abandoned and forgotten, was now alive with the warmth of a family reunited through time, letters and secrets carefully preserved. The morning sun rose over Silvermere, reflecting gold on the calm lake. Mira woke to the soft sound of birds singing outside the cabin. Ryan was already awake, running across the small clearing to the lake. Mira smiled, feeling a happiness she had never known. The cabin, once abandoned and silent, was now alive with laughter, warmth, and discovery. She made breakfast while thinking about everything they had uncovered. The hidden coins, the documents, the letters, and the key to the final secret, all of it had changed their lives. But more importantly, it had given them a connection to family they never knew they had. Clara had not only left them wealth, but also guidance and love. After breakfast, Mira sat by the fireplace and began organizing the documents. She carefully read each letter from Clara, learning more about the family history. Clara had written about the struggles she faced, the love she had for Elaine, and the hope she carried for future generations. Mira felt a deep respect for her grandmother. She had protected their family with wisdom and patience. Rian came running with the map they had found in the wooden box. "Mama, can we explore the other side of the lake today?" he asked. Mira nodded. "Yes, Ryan. But we will be careful and take only what we need." They packed a small bag with water, snacks, and a few items from the treasure to keep safe. As they walked along the lake's edge, Mira noticed signs of nature's quiet beauty. Deer moved gracefully between the trees and birds sang in harmony. The forest seemed peaceful, and the air smelled fresh and clean. Reaching the far side of the lake, they discovered a small stone path hidden beneath fallen leaves. Mira recognized it from Clara's notes. The path led to a tiny clearing with an old wooden bench facing the water. It was simple, yet it felt as if Clara had built it for reflection and calm. Mira sat down and watched Ryan skip stones across the water. She realized that Clara's gifts were more than wealth. They were about teaching patience, observation, and respect for life. Mira felt grateful for the lessons hidden in the cabin and the land around it. Returning to the cabin, Mira decided it was time to make the place more livable. She cleaned the rooms thoroughly, fixed the broken steps, and set up curtains in the windows. Ryan helped with small tasks like dusting the shelves and arranging books. The cabin slowly transformed from abandoned to warm and welcoming. While Mira was working, she discovered another small wooden box tucked under the kitchen floorboards. This one was lighter than the others. Inside were photographs of Clara with children she had cared for in the past. Each child had a note about their life and a small memento. Mira realized that her grandmother had been generous and kind not only to family but to others in need. She showed Ryan a small carved wooden bird from the box. "Look, Ryan, this is a gift from your great-grandmother. She wanted you to know that kindness matters more than wealth." Ryan held the bird tightly. "I will keep it forever, Mama." Days passed and Mira began making plans for their future. The documents in the safe and the treasures they had found gave them security. But Mira knew the real value was the lessons and love Clara had left behind. She thought about opening a small library or a community place in the town, somewhere that could help children and families. Clara's words about helping others guided her thoughts. One afternoon, as Mira and Ryan walked along the forest path, they discovered a small hidden garden behind the cabin. The garden had once been carefully tended, with flower beds now overgrown but still beautiful. Mira decided to restore it. Together, she and Ryan cleared weeds, planted new flowers, and watered the soil. Slowly, the garden came back to life, much like the cabin. As the weeks passed, the cabin became a home filled with warmth, laughter, and memories. Mira and Ryan learned more about Clara and their family history. They found letters that connected them to neighbors and friends who had once known Clara. Mira visited the small town of Brindle Hollow, speaking to people who remembered her grandmother's kindness and generosity. Each story she heard added depth to her understanding. Clara had been a pillar of the community, quietly helping others and always protecting her family. Mira felt proud to carry on that legacy. One evening, Mira sat by the lake with Ryan. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Ryan asked, "Mama, do you think Grandma Clara can see us now?" Mira smiled. "I think she is with us in spirit, Ryan. She left this place for us and taught us how to live with love and care. She will always be part of our lives." Ryan leaned against her, content. Mira realized that the cabin had given them more than safety and wealth. It had given them a home, a sense of belonging, and a connection to the past that would guide their future. Over time, Mira began sharing the story of Clara with neighbors and friends. She told them about the cabin, the lake, and the hidden treasures, but she emphasized the lessons of kindness, patience, and generosity. People came to visit, inspired by the story and the family's resilience. Mira also made sure Ryan understood the importance of family and values. She encouraged him to explore the forest, learn about nature, and care for others. The cabin became a place of learning and growth for them both. One quiet night, Mira looked around the cabin. The walls that had once been empty and silent now held photos, letters, and memories. The fireplace was warm, the furniture comfortable, and the air filled with peace. She knew that Clara's gift had not been only the fortune, but the opportunity to build a life rooted in love, understanding, and courage. Ryan slept peacefully under his blanket, clutching the wooden bird. Mira sat by the window, looking at the lake shimmering under the moonlight. She whispered softly, "Thank you, Grandma Clara. You have given us more than I could have ever imagined." The wind rustled the trees, as if responding to her words. Mira felt calm and full of hope. She knew that life would have challenges, but they were prepared. The cabin, the lake, and the legacy of Clara Turner had given them a foundation strong enough to face anything. In the days that followed, Mira and Ryan settled into their new life. They laughed, worked, and explored together. The cabin became a place of joy and learning. Every discovery, every memory, every letter from Clara was cherished. Mira promised herself that she would honor Clara's wishes, using the fortune wisely, helping others, and creating a life full of meaning. The cabin that was once abandoned had transformed into a home full of warmth, history, and hope. Mira knew that this was not just the end of their journey, but the beginning of a life filled with love, family, and new possibilities. She felt grateful for the chance to start again, knowing that Clara's spirit guided them every step of the way. Mira held Ryan close and whispered, "This is our home now, Ryan. and it will always be our home, filled with love and hope. Outside, the moonlight reflected on the lake. The wind carried the soft whispers of the forest. The cabin stood strong and welcoming, a place where the past and present met, where family thrived, and where dreams began anew. The story of Mira, Ryan, and Clara had found its peace, but the cabin would continue to hold the magic of love, history, and secrets waiting to inspire future generations.